The air in the funeral parlor was thick with the scent of lilies and grief. Eleanor Grayson stood by the open casket, her trembling fingers brushing the edge of the polished wood, as if touching it could bring her closer to her son, Michael. At 72, she had outlived her only child, a cruel twist of fate no mother should endure. His face, serene in death, bore the same gentle features she'd kissed goodnight decades ago. Her heart ached with a weight that threatened to crush her frail frame. Yet she stood tall, her silver hair neatly pinned, her black dress a quiet testament to her sorrow. Around her, mourners whispered condolences, their voices a low hum against the organ's mournful chords. Eleanor's daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood across the room, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd. At 35, Vanessa was a vision of calculated elegance, blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, her black designer dress hugging her frame. But her face was a mask of disdain. Her lips curled as she glanced at Eleanor. The tension between them had simmered for years, ever since Michael married Vanessa a decade ago. To Vanessa, Eleanor was a burden, an old woman clinging to her son's life like a leech. To Eleanor, Vanessa was a storm that had swept into their family, leaving cracks in its foundation. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the early days of Michael's marriage. She'd welcomed Vanessa with open arms, hoping to share the love she'd poured into her son. But Vanessa had made it clear she wanted no part of Eleanor's world. "We don't need your casseroles or your outdated advice," she'd snapped once, when Eleanor offered to help with their newborn. Lily, Michael, ever the peacemaker, had tried to bridge the gap, but his efforts only deepened the divide. Now, with him gone, the chasm felt insurmountable. As the service began, the priest's words washed over Eleanor, barely registering. She clutched a single red rose, its thorns pricking her palm, a small pain to anchor her against the overwhelming tide of loss. Michael had been her anchor, her reason to keep going after her husband. Thomas died 15 years ago. A car accident, they'd said. A drunk driver. Now, another accident had stolen Michaela fall from a ladder while fixing the roof of their family home. Senseless. Preventable. The kind of tragedy that made you question God's plan. Vanessa's voice cut through Eleanor's reverie. "This is all so performative," she muttered to a woman beside her, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "She's milking the sympathy." As always. The words stung, but Eleanor kept her gaze on Michael's face, refusing to give Vanessa the satisfaction of a reaction. She'd learned long ago that silence was her strongest weapon against her daughter-in-law's venom. The service ended, and the mourners shuffled toward the reception area. Eleanor lingered by the casket, whispering a final goodbye. "I'll make you proud, my boy," she promised, her voice barely audible. She didn't know how, but she would honor his memory. She had to. In the reception hall, the air was lighter, filled with the clink of glasses and murmured conversations. Eleanor moved through the crowd, accepting condolences with a grace she didn't feel. She spotted Lily, her 9-year-old granddaughter, sitting alone in a corner, her dark curls framing a face too young for such sorrow. Eleanor's heart clenched. She approached, kneeling despite the ache in her knees. "Sweetheart," she said softly, brushing a curl from Lily's face. "How are you holding up?" Lily's eyes, so like Michael's, filled with tears. "I miss Daddy," she whispered. "I know, darling. I miss him too." Eleanor pulled her into a gentle hug, feeling the girl's small frame tremble. "We'll get through this together. Okay." Before Lily could respond, Vanessa appeared, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Lily, come with me," she said, her tone clipped. "You don't need to be coddled." Eleanor stood, meeting Vanessa's gaze. She's grieving. Vanessa. She needs comfort. Vanessa's lips thinned. Don't tell me how to raise my daughter. You've done enough damage. Hanging on to Michael like a parasite, draining his time and energy. This family doesn't need you anymore. The words hit like a slap, drawing gasps from nearby mourners. Eleanor's chest tightened, but she held her ground, her voice steady. I love my son, Vanessa, and I love Lily. I'm not going anywhere. Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could retort, a man in a crisp suit approached. Mrs. Grayson, Mrs. Carter, he said, nodding to Eleanor and Vanessa. I'm Richard Hayes, Michael's lawyer. The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow. I'd like you both to attend. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. A will. Michael had never mentioned one. Vanessa's expression faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face before she masked it with a curt nod. Fine, she said, turning away, pulling Lily with her. As the crowd thinned, Eleanor found a quiet corner, her thoughts a tangle of grief and questions. What had Michael planned? And why did Vanessa look so unsettled? Tomorrow, she sensed, would change everything. The next morning, Eleanor woke to a world that felt emptier without Michael. Her small apartment, once filled with his laughter during Sunday visits, was now a silent reminder of her loss. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple gray dress that mirrored her somber mood. Her hands shook as she pinned her hair, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman worn by grief but resolute. Today, she would hear her son's final wishes, and she clung to the hope that they might offer some clarity, some purpose. The lawyer's office was a stark contrast to the funeral parlor sterile, with polished wood and glass that gleamed under fluorescent lights. Eleanor arrived early, her steps slow but steady. Vanessa was already there, seated across from Richard Hayes, her posture rigid, her fingers tapping impatiently on the armrest. Lily sat beside her, clutching a stuffed rabbit, her eyes downcast. Eleanor offered her granddaughter a small smile, but Vanessa's sharp glance warned her to keep her distance. Richard cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Thank you both for coming. Michael's will is straightforward, but it contains some unexpected provisions. He opened a folder, pulling out a document with Michael's familiar scrawl on the cover. Eleanor's heart twinged at the sight of it, a piece of her son still alive in those lines. Before we begin, Richard said, Michael left a letter to be read aloud. It's addressed to both of you. He unfolded a single sheet of paper, his voice steady as he began. Dear Mom, Dear Vanessa, Richard read, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for the pain that brings. Mom, you gave me everything: a home, love, and the courage to be a good man. Vanessa, you gave me Lily, the greatest gift of my life. I know things haven't always been easy between you two, but I hope this will bring you closer. Eleanor's eyes welled up, her fingers clutching the edge of her chair. Vanessa's expression remained unreadable, but her tapping fingers stilled. Richard continued, to my daughter, Lily, I leave my love and a trust fund for her education and future, to be managed by my mother, Eleanor Grayson, until Lily reaches 21. Vanessa's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What? Eleanor, that's ridiculous. I'm her mother. Richard raised a hand, his tone calm but firm. Please, let me finish. He turned the page. To my wife, Vanessa, I leave our family home and a portion of my savings, provided she agrees to maintain a relationship with my mother for Lily's sake. To my mother, Eleanor Grayson, I leave the majority of my estate, including my investment accounts and the cabin by Lakeview, to ensure her security and independence. The room fell silent, the weight of Michael's words hanging heavy. Eleanor's breath caught. The cabin where she and Michael had spent summers fishing and laughing was hers, and the majority of his estate. She'd never known Michael had such assets. He'd always lived modestly, pouring his heart into his family and his work as a carpenter. Vanessa's face flushed red. "This is absurd," she spat, her voice rising. "Eleanor gets everything. She's an old woman who's done nothing but cling to Michael's coattails. I'm his wife." "Mrs. Carter," Richard said, his voice steady. Michael was clear in his intentions. He wanted to ensure his mother's well-being and Lily's future while encouraging unity between you both. "Unity?" Vanessa scoffed, standing abruptly. "He's rewarding her for being a burden. I'll contest this." He wasn't in his right mind. Eleanor's hands trembled, but her voice was calm. "Vanessa, Michael loved you. He wanted us to be a family for Lily. Can't you see that?" Vanessa whirled on her, eyes blazing. "Don't lecture me. You've always been in the way, and now you've manipulated him even in death." She grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her toward the door. "We're leaving." Lily's small voice broke through. "Grandma, are you coming with us?" Eleanor's heart ached, but she shook her head. "Not today, sweetheart. But I'll see you soon." She forced a smile, watching as Vanessa stormed out, Lily trailing behind. Richard sighed, removing his glasses. "Eleanor, I know this is a lot." Michael anticipated resistance from Vanessa. He left a second letter. "For your eyes only. He asked me to give it to you privately." He handed her a sealed envelope, her name written in Michael's hand. Eleanor clutched it, her fingers tracing the ink. "Thank you, Richard," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Back at her apartment, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the envelope unopened before her. She was afraid of what Michael might say, afraid of the responsibility he'd placed on her shoulders. But she couldn't delay any longer. With a deep breath, she broke the seal and began to read. "Mom," it began, "you've always been my rock. I know Vanessa hasn't made it easy, but she's hurting too. I'm trusting you to look after Lily, to show her the love you showed me. The money and the cabin are for you to live freely, not to feel burdened. You're stronger than you know. Love, Michael." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, but for the first time since Michael's death, she felt a spark of purpose. She would honor his wishes. She would fight for Lily and maybe, just maybe, find a way to bridge the gap with Vanessa. Days turned into weeks, and the sting of Vanessa's words at the funeral lingered in Eleanor's mind. Parasite, she'd called her, a label that cut deeper than Eleanor cared to admit. But Michael's letter, tucked safely in her bedside drawer, was a lifeline. She read it nightly, drawing strength from his words. She wasn't a burden, she was his mother, entrusted with his legacy and his daughter's future. Eleanor began visiting the cabin by Lakeview, a modest wooden retreat Michael had loved. It was a place of memories, Michael as a boy, splashing in the lake, his laughter echoing through the pines. Now, it was hers, a gift she hadn't expected. She spent hours there, cleaning the dust from the shelves, tending to the overgrown garden, as if nurturing the space could keep Michael's spirit alive. It was here, surrounded by his memory, that she began to plan. Lily was her priority. Michael's will had given Eleanor control of Lily's trust fund, a responsibility that weighed heavily but also gave her purpose. She reached out to Vanessa, proposing visits with Lily, But her calls went unanswered. Her texts ignored. Vanessa's silence was a wall. But Eleanor refused to give up. She wrote letters to Lily. Simple notes filled with love and stories about her father, hoping one day they'd reach her. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor received a call from Richard. Vanessa's moving forward with contesting the will, he said, his tone grave. She's hired a lawyer, claiming Michael was coerced into favoring you. She's also restricting your access to Lily, citing emotional distress. Eleanor's heart sank. Can she do that? Keep me from my granddaughter. It's complicated, Richard admitted. The will is airtight. But Vanessa's claiming you unduly influenced Michael. We'll need to prepare for a legal battle. And there's something else. Michael left a video message, recorded a month before his death. He wanted you to see it if Vanessa contested the will. A video. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Can I see it now? I'll send it over, Richard promised. But brace yourself, Eleanor. It's emotional. That evening, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, her old laptop humming to life. The video file loaded, and Michael's face filled the screen. He looked tired, his brown eyes heavy with something unspoken, but his smile was warm, familiar. Mom, he began, his voice steady. If you're watching this, things have gotten messy. I'm sorry for that. I made the will the way I did because I trust you. Vanessa's strong, but she's driven by fear of losing control, fear of not being enough. I need you to be the bigger person, to fight for Lily, for our family. The money, the cabinet's not just for you. It's for you to build something new, something lasting. I love you. Always. The screen went black, and Eleanor sobbed, her hands covering her face. Michael had seen this coming, the rift, the fight. He'd trusted her to hold it together. She wiped her tears, resolve hardening. She wouldn't let him down. The next day, Eleanor met with Richard to strategize. Vanessa's lawyer is pushing hard, he said, spreading documents across his desk. They're arguing you manipulated Michael's decisions, that you preyed on his loyalty to you. That's nonsense, Eleanor said, her voice firm. Michael was his own man. He made those choices because he knew Vanessa's priorities. Richard nodded. We'll need evidence of your relationship with Michael, letters, photos, anything showing his trust in you. And we need to prove you're fit to manage Lily's trust fund. Eleanor spent days gathering mementos, Michael's childhood drawings, letters he'd written her from college, photos of them at the cabin. Each item was a piece of their bond, a rebuttal to Vanessa's claims. She also reached out to old friends, neighbors, anyone who could vouch for her character. The process was exhausting, but it gave her a sense of purpose, a way to channel her grief. Meanwhile, she kept writing to Lily, slipping the letters into Vanessa's mailbox when she knew they wouldn't be home. She didn't know if Lily read them, but she hoped her words would plant seeds of love, of connection. One letter recounted a summer when Michael taught Lily to fish at the cabin, his patience endless as she giggled over a tangled line. Your daddy loved you so much, Eleanor wrote. And so do I. As the court date approached, Eleanor felt the weight of the fight ahead. Vanessa's accusations were a distortion of her life, her love for her son. But Michael's video, his letter, his will, they were her armor. She wasn't just fighting for money or property. She was fighting for Lily, for the family Michael had believed in. And she would not back down. The courtroom was a cold, imposing space, its high ceilings and wooden benches amplifying every sound, the shuffle of papers, the murmur of spectators, the judge's gavel. Eleanor sat beside Richard, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gray dress neat but unassuming. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in a tailored suit. Her face was a mask of determination, but Eleanor noticed the slight tremor in her hands. For all her bravado, Vanessa was nervous. The hearing began with Vanessa's lawyer presenting her case. He painted Eleanor as a manipulative figure, an aging widow who'd clung to her son's resources, twisting his loyalty to secure her future. Eleanor Grayson exerted undue influence over Michael Carter. He argued, his voice smooth and confident. She preyed on his sense of duty, ensuring she'd inherit the bulk of his estate at the expense of his wife and child. Eleanor's stomach churned, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes fixed on the judge. Richard had warned her this would be brutal, and she'd prepared herself for the lies. Still, hearing her love for Michael twisted into something selfish stung deeply. When it was Richard's turn, he stood, his voice calm but commanding. Your Honor, Michael Carter was a thoughtful, deliberate man. His will reflects his values love for his mother, his daughter, and his wife. Eleanor Grayson is not a manipulator, but a devoted mother who supported Michael his entire life. He presented the evidence. Eleanor had gathered letters, photos, testimonies from friends who'd seen her sacrifices, her unwavering support. The judge, a stern woman with graying hair, listened intently, her eyes flicking between the lawyers. Then Richard played Michael's video. As his face appeared on the courtroom screen, Eleanor's breath hitched. His voice filled the room, steady and heartfelt, speaking of his trust in Eleanor, his hope for unity. The spectators fell silent, and even Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa stared at the screen, her lips pressed tight, her eyes glistening. When the video ended, Richard turned to the judge. Michael's wishes are clear. He chose Eleanor to manage Lily's trust fund because he trusted her judgment. He left her the estate not out of manipulation, but out of love and gratitude. The judge nodded, making notes. We'll reconvene tomorrow for further testimony, she said, dismissing the court. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the rain streak the glass, her thoughts on Lily. She'd seen her granddaughter briefly in the courtroom, sitting with a family friend, her small face pale and confused. Eleanor ached to hold her, to shield her from this ugliness. She wrote another letter, pouring her heart onto the page, promising Lily they'd visit the cabin together, make new memories. The next day, the hearing continued. Vanessa took the stand, her voice steady but laced with bitterness. Eleanor was always there, hovering, taking Michael's attention. She said, he felt obligated to care for her, even when it strained our marriage. She's not fit to manage Lily's future. Richard cross-examined her gently but firmly. Mrs. Carter, did Michael ever express that he felt burdened by his mother? Vanessa hesitated, her eyes darting away. Not in so many words, but I could tell. He was always running to her, fixing her problems. And yet, Richard countered, he chose to leave her the majority of his estate. Does that sound like a man resentful of his mother? Vanessa's silence was telling. The judge's expression remained unreadable, but Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. Michael's love for her was undeniable, woven into every piece of evidence Richard presented. As the day ended, Eleanor caught Vanessa's eye in the hallway. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Vanessa said, her voice low, this isn't over. Eleanor, you won't take everything from me. I'm not trying to take anything, Eleanor replied softly. I just want to honor Michael's wishes. For Lily. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she turned away without another word. Eleanor watched her go, her heart heavy but resolute. She wasn't fighting Vanessa, she was fighting for Michael's vision of their family. That evening, Richard called with news. "The judge wants to meet with Lily privately tomorrow," he said. "She wants to understand her perspective before ruling." Eleanor's heart raced. Lily, her sweet, sensitive granddaughter, would have a voice in this. She prayed Lily would speak from her heart, that she'd remember the love they shared. As she drifted to sleep, Eleanor clutched Michael's letter, whispering a promise to keep fighting, no matter what. The morning of the final hearing dawned gray and heavy, mirroring Eleanor's mood. She arrived at the courthouse early, her hands clasped around a small photo of Michael and Lily at the cabin, a talisman of hope. Today, the judge would hear from Lily and make her ruling. Eleanor's stomach knotted at the thought of her granddaughter caught in this battle. But she trusted Lily's heart. She trusted Michael's faith in them both. In the courtroom, the air was tense. Vanessa sat stiffly, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Eleanor caught a glimpse of Lily entering through a side door, her small frame swallowed by a too large sweater, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly. The judge, her expression softer than before, motioned for Lily to join her in chambers. Eleanor's heart ached as the door closed behind them, cutting her off from the one person who mattered most. The wait was agonizing. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to Michael's video, his voice echoing in her mind. "Be the bigger person," he'd said. She wanted to honor that, to find a way to heal the rift with Vanessa. But every attempt had been met with hostility. Still, for Lily's sake, she would keep trying. After what felt like an eternity, Lily returned, her eyes red but her chin lifted. She didn't look at Vanessa or Eleanor, taking her seat with the family friend. The judge followed, her face unreadable as she addressed the courtroom. "I've spoken with Lily Carter," she began, her voice steady. "She's a bright, thoughtful child, and her perspective has been illuminating." She expressed a deep love for both her mother and her grandmother, and a desire to maintain those relationships. She also spoke fondly of time spent with her grandmother, particularly at a family cabin. Eleanor's breath caught, her eyes stinging. Lily remembered. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her expression unreadable. The judge continued. "Michael Carter's will is clear and legally sound. There's no evidence of undue influence. His decision to entrust Eleanor Grayson with his daughter's trust fund and the majority of his estate reflects his confidence in her. However, I'm also mindful of the need for family unity. I'm upholding the will as written, but I strongly encourage both parties to work toward a cooperative relationship for Lily's well-being." Vanessa's lawyer began to protest, but the judge raised a hand. "The matter is settled. Mrs. Carter, I urge you to honor your husband's wishes and foster a relationship with Ms. Grayson. This court will not tolerate further attempts to restrict access to the child without just cause." The gavel fell, and the room erupted in murmurs. Eleanor felt a weight lift, though the victory was bittersweet. She'd won, but at what cost? Vanessa's face was pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time, Eleanor saw not just anger but vulnerability. Vanessa was losing something to control. Certainty. Maybe even her sense of self. As the crowd dispersed, Eleanor approached Lily, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. "You were so brave." Lily hugged her tightly, her voice muffled. "I told the judge about the cabin. Grandma, how Daddy loved it there with us." Eleanor's heart swelled. "We'll go back there. I promise. Together." Vanessa appeared, her expression guarded. "Lily, let's go," she said, her voice softer than usual. Eleanor stood, meeting Vanessa's gaze. Vanessa, I don't want to fight. Michael wanted us to be a family. Can we try? For Lily. Vanessa's lips trembled, but she nodded curtly. We'll see, she said, turning away, Lily's hand in hers. Over the next weeks, Eleanor focused on rebuilding. She invited Lily to the cabin, and to her surprise, Vanessa allowed it. The first visit was tentative. Lily was quiet, Vanessa distant. But as they walked the lake's edge, Lily's laughter broke through, and Eleanor caught Vanessa watching, a flicker of something softer in her eyes. Eleanor kept writing letters, not just to Lily, but to Vanessa now, sharing stories of Michael, offering olive branches. She didn't expect miracles, but she hoped for progress. The cabin became their neutral ground, a place where grief could soften into memory, where they could begin to heal. Summer arrived, and the cabin by Lakeview buzzed with life again. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching Lily chase fireflies across the lawn, her giggles echoing through the warm evening air. The lake shimmered under the setting sun, a mirror of the peace Eleanor was beginning to feel. It had been 6 months since the courtroom battle, and while the wounds of Michael's loss still ached, the cabin had become a sanctuary, a place where his love lived on. Vanessa's car pulled up, and Eleanor braced herself. Their relationship was still fragile, a patchwork of tentative steps and unspoken apologies. Vanessa stepped out, her blonde hair loose for once, her face less guarded than it had been. Lily ran to her, throwing her arms around her mother. Mom, I caught a firefly. Want to see? Vanessa smiled a real smile, not the tight-lipped one Eleanor was used to. Show me, baby, she said, letting Lily lead her to the grass. Eleanor joined them, keeping her distance at first. She'd learned to give Vanessa space, to let her come to terms with Michael's will in her own time. The trust fund was secure for Lily, and Eleanor had begun using the estate to fund small community projects. Michael would have Lovita Library Corner in his name, a scholarship for young carpenters. The cabin, though, remained her haven, a place to rebuild what grief had torn apart. Eleanor, Vanessa said, her voice hesitant as Lily darted off to chase another firefly. I read your letters. The ones about Michael. Eleanor's heart skipped. I hoped you would. I just wanted you to know him the way I did. Vanessa looked away, her eyes on the lake. I was so angry. At him. At you. At everything. I thought you were taking him from me, even after he was gone. But those stories, they reminded me of why I loved him. Eleanor nodded, her throat tight. He loved you, Vanessa. And Lily. He wanted us to be okay. I know, Vanessa whispered, her voice breaking. I'm trying. It's hard, but I'm trying. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly, but it was enough. Eleanor reached out, resting a hand on Vanessa's arm. That's all we can do. Try. They stood in silence, watching Lily dance under the stars. For the first time, Eleanor felt a thread of hope, not just for Lily, but for all of them. Michael's will had been more than a legal document. It was a blueprint for healing, a call to love beyond grief. As the summer stretched on, the cabin became their meeting place. Vanessa came more often, sometimes staying for dinner, her guard lowering with each visit. Lily thrived, her laughter a balm for both women. They planted a garden together, a tribute to Michael, who'd loved tending the earth. Each seedling felt like a promise, new beginning rooted in his memory. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Vanessa handed Eleanor a small box. I found this in Michael's things, she said. It's for you. Inside was a locket, engraved with a tiny lily flower. A note in Michael's handwriting read, "For Mom, who holds us together." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she clasped it around her neck, the weight of it grounding her. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. Vanessa nodded, her own eyes misty. They weren't a perfect family, not yet. But they were trying, and that was enough. The cabin, the lake, the fireflies, they were Michael's legacy. A reminder that love could endure even the deepest loss. Eleanor looked at Lily, at Vanessa, and felt her son's presence in the warmth of the night. They would be okay. Together.